Hey everyone, it's great to see you. And today, I'd like to talk about A Plague Tale: Innocence, game developed by Asobo Studios, and I forgot to check the year. This particular title says 2019, but I feel like that's pretty recent. Maybe it was only 2019, a few years back. It was published by Focus Interactive, a very cool company with a lot of games under their belt. Asobo being a company with this series. I think they worked on The Crew 2 for Ubisoft, and a ton of licensed, especially Disney games under their belt. Kind of came out of nowhere with this title, and I had not seen a whole lot of hype around the time that it released for it, but through some recommendations of YouTubers and some friends who had played it, I decided to pick it up and play myself. And so, back in maybe 2020-ish or so, I had played through A Plague Tale: Innocence. I recently bought a Requiem, and so to kind of preamp my gaming experience for that game, I wanted to revisit Innocence. I wanted to get the Platinum Trophy, enjoy the PS5 upgrade, and just re-experience the game and share my opinions about it. So, for a PS4 game, pretty standard cover and so on and so forth. And of course, on the inside, we get the sad disc-only experience, something you see a lot with PlayStation 4 games. Pretty interesting game. You play as this girl Amicia, and most of the game you are accompanied and escorting her brother Hugo, little 5-year-old kid, around parts of France. And the game takes place during the 100 Years' War. There's also a crazy plague that's broken out, and these swarms of black rats are kind of everywhere, and they'll eat you if you get too close to them, and the primary way to keep them away is through fire. And Hugo, he's a little kid, he's fallen ill with some kind of disease, and so he's been in the estate, the family estate, most of his life, while his mother, who's an alchemist, she's trying to devise a cure, come up with a way to cure Hugo from this disease. When Lord Nicholas and his army, they show up and they attack the estate, and they kill the parents, and they are looking for Hugo. And as Amicia, you have to basically survive with Hugo and get away from them. And so a lot of the game is this, you're playing third person. I would call it survival horror, probably more survival experience. You're just a little girl. You have a little sling that you can throw rocks at. You'll get cool alchemist powers later on in the game to do things such as light fires or create distractions or lure rats to different areas to get around them. But the core part of the gameplay is kind of puzzle challenge or puzzle focused, getting through either different waves of enemies or waves of rats as you progress towards your ultimate objective across 16 chapters or so. What I really want to say about the story is that I did find the story to be pretty intriguing. The game's not too long. It's maybe, you could probably beat it in about 10 hours or so. And I felt like every beat and every chapter was well paced, made sense in terms of what's going to happen next in the story, and progressed in a very satisfying way. And so I was really happy with that, and I felt like the writing was well on top of it. One thing that is challenging is the first time I played the game, I played it with the French VA, and then the second time I played it with the English VA. And the English voice acting is pretty... Asobo is a French developer, and you can tell that the English voice actors they hired are clearly French, and they know English. And some of the delivery is very wooden and kind of goofy at times. I got some Tommy Wiseau vibes from The Room at times when listening to the delivery and conversation pieces between Amicia and Hugo. I can't really speak to the quality of the French voice acting. However, to somebody who doesn't speak French, it sounded pretty great and natural, and also fit the mood and vibe of the game. I mean, since the game takes place in France. And even though that was the case, again, I thought the writing was super strong and made for a good story experience regardless. And I think that this kind of distraction kind of waned over the course of the game. I think I got more used to the voices and so on and so forth. So this could just be a personal gripe, but it is something that I remember kind of sitting with me throughout the experience. But otherwise, the sound's really good. When you're in areas where you have to deal with enemies spatially, I feel like you get a really good understanding of where those enemies are in your environment based on the noises they make, whether that's footsteps or talking or so on and so forth. And I thought the game had a really intriguing soundtrack. It's these like grim and dreary at times orchestral pieces, which really help set the tone and mood for the game. And they weren't distracting at all. They really added to the atmosphere and the environment that I think Asobo really wanted to craft. And if crafting vibes was really a focus in A Plague Tale: Innocence, I think they really capitalized on that, and they created something very gripping and visually fantastic. I mean, the game has very dark imagery taking place at night in a lot of areas. Early on in the game, you'll have these like, oh, I'm going through the woods kind of vibes, or ooh, I'm in a farm. But where lighting is used, whether that's a sunset or a fire, there's really great lighting effects. One thing that was surprising to me is that the game centrally focuses around staying in light, staying in fire, because when you're dealing with rats, that's an area they can't go. And the shadows are there, but the shadows aren't particularly complex. And I would have thought that dealing with light, that at least in my eyes, there would have been more to kind of just visually go ooh at when it came to the way in which shadows hit walls and hit objects and hit your character, but didn't really do that for me. However, in the PlayStation 5 version, the frame rate's fantastic. It runs at a very smooth, I believe 60 frames, and visually it looks stunning. Again, the art style being this dark and sometimes gothic and horrific looking towards the end. Towards the end of the game, you'll go to this church, and the church is covered in like this rotting abscess created by the rats. And visually, I just thought, this looks fantastic. It almost looked like something from Bloodborne at times. And so I really did love the direction they went visually with this game. And that increased fidelity of playing it on the PlayStation 5 just helped a lot of that pop once again. And then in the graphics and kind of the navigation or gameplay and navigation and world design, the game it's pretty linear. It takes place across 16 chapters. So you'll kind of follow Amicia and you go through this story along the way. And I will say that I really miss linear games. Seems like more and more the average game either devolves into open world or kind of hub world environments where you have an open space to run around and do things. I think the linear gameplay experience really creates an opportunity to build arenas and build environments that require certain approaches and certain ways of dealing with circumstances to get through them. And I felt like in the game they did that well. The game doesn't have any difficulty options, and so you kind of get one flat experience. I thought that the developers left way too many survival and crafting items around the world because honestly, throughout the entire game, I was always stocked with items. And I think a big part of it is that when you were facing a challenge, such as you have to make it through these rats and you have to light these braziers to do that, it really required you to have the materials to craft ignifer, which is one of the alchemies you can use to light a fire. And so if you didn't have that, well, then you couldn't move on through the story. So I think they created enough supplies to where you always could do those things. But I would have liked if the environments were designed a little more around, okay, you may have ignifer, which will help you get through this area easier, but you may not. So there's more challenging or complex approaches required in order to capitalize on, getting through this area of the game. And I think that would have been cool because one of the things that calls back for me is the original Resident Evil titles, where depending on how you hoarded or depending on when you used a resource or not, you could really put yourself in a bad situation that made getting through a particular section of the game hard and challenging. And challenge and difficulty is not something that was here in the game, though I did enjoy the experience. And another thing that kind of sits on the game's difficulty is the fact that everything can one-shot you. Enemies, rats, it doesn't matter. Amicia will get eaten alive or stabbed or beaten if one of them gets close and has the opportunity to deal that blow. And so checkpoints are incredibly frequent, and stakes are often, you would think because you're going to die so often that they are high, but stakes are really low because you checkpoint so often, and it really gives you the opportunity to run around and explore an environment and experiment before committing to kind of getting through in a certain way. And so I would have liked to see some of that cut back, because I think it would have really capitalized on the idea that, oh, this is a survival horror, it's a horrific experience that these characters are going through, and you're along with them on that journey. And so that's something I would have wanted more. But the game is fun. It's the standard loop of A to B. We have these challenges in the way. You can keep Hugo with you. You can let him stay somewhere so that you can move around the environment quicker and do things. That's really about it. It's basically, there's a lot of stealth in the game, and there's some combat because you can kill enemies with your sling. You can hit them in the head if they are not wearing a helmet, and if they are wearing a helmet, then it creates some barriers for you to do that. But generally, sneaking around is your go-to, and I didn't find it particularly challenging. But because the story was so well written, and I enjoyed the characters, and I enjoyed the linearity of kind of experiencing the story, and I loved visually what they did with the game, and I love the concepts, this swarm of rats where there's like 10 million rats on the screen at once. I thought that was such a cool experience, and because of that, the game is truly a gem. I really enjoyed A Plague Tale: Innocence. I would have liked a little more out of the game gameplay wise, but I can give it a pass based on all the merits that it really gives in other avenues. And so that's really all I wanted to say about the game. If you buy it on PS4, you get the PS5 upgrade totally free, which is cool. And the game's also super cheap. You can probably pick it up for under $10 in a lot of situations. And so if you haven't played it, I recommend to go out and check it out. And if you love it, then check out Requiem too. Requiem is a title that I don't even think a lot of people knew was a sequel. So it's kind of cool to be able to talk about this and recommend it to folks. So that's really all I wanted to say about A Plague Tale: Innocence. Did you play this game? And if so, what did you think about it? Curious to know. And if you liked the video, please like the video, and also consider sticking around and subscribing. Would love to have you along for the journey as we talk about and discuss more games and get your thoughts as well. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, hope you take care.